All right, this is Sunday evening, September 10th, 2017. And this is sonsofgod.com. This is Edward and Ann. And we're trying a new service, so bear with us. And we'll see how this goes. We had a lot of problems with the other service with the voice dropping out. So that was a problem. So we'll try and see if this service will service the needs better moving forward. I don't know how long we'll go with this evening. This may be short. There's just something that's been unfolding, and we're still kind of getting a read on it. And it's not so much that I have a specific word that I want to share, as it is something that we're just kind of tracking on here lately. So Lord, we loose this word tonight, and help us put it all together. You know, it's kind of an ongoing thing where we're constantly trying to put pieces of the puzzle together, trying to figure out how it all works, trying to get a handle on exactly what the Lord is demanding and what we can do to move more quickly down this path. And I know that we're coming into the time of the Feast of Tabernacles. So that will be interesting. It's coming up probably in about 30 days. So we're probably actually less than that. So we're in a window of time with the Feast of Tabernacles coming on board. And many of you are aware of the significance of the Feast of Tabernacles, what it represents, in theory, as far as a provision and a reality of what God has set aside for the sons to enter into. It really comes down to just what we call the indwelling of the Father and the Son within us. So very unique that it's happening this year. Be very interesting to see exactly what unfolds. But we've just been kind of giving some thought to something that we've kind of been looking at in a third person. And I'm probably not the most qualified to really expound on this topic, but there is something about the visitation of glory that has been happening. It's nothing that is new. It's been unfolding for quite a long time in progressive degrees. I think the word talks about how we're changed from glory to glory. So there's been the glory, the visitation of glory upon the sons that has been an unfolding reality. But we have pushed through a timeline here that is, everything is just really different. And so we're talking about just what this glory is that's beginning to happen. And, it just goes back into, you go back into the book of Moses, book of Exodus, and how Moses, couldn't look on the face of God, and no man can see the face of God and live. And, there's so many different references to the glory that is coming. It even talks about how, the Father's going to glorify himself in the sons. And so you could go back, there's many scriptures that reference it. I was pulling up different ones earlier today and just looking at them. Probably we won't go over them right now, and I'll probably do a better better justice to this word later in the week. We've just been in a little bit of a transition, and I'm still trying to kind of put it all together myself. But I was thinking about the book of Daniel and the prophecy, to Daniel, in the latter days, they that lead the righteous shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. And to me, that references a visitation of the glory that, was to come, that was being showed to Daniel. And we all know, what happened with Moses when he went up and he had to cover his face with a veil as he came back down to speak to the children of Israel. And then, of course, that glory faded. And that would be a good scripture to read. Let me see if I can find that. In 2 Corinthians 3, verse 7, if the ministry of death in letters engraved on stone came with glory, so that the sons of Israel could not look intently at the face of Moses because of the glory of his face, fading as it was, how will the ministry of the Spirit fail to be even more with glory? And then it goes on. But the point was that the glory that rested upon Moses faded. We all know the promise. The promise is that there's going to be a visitation of the glory of God upon the sons, a glory that will not fade away. And more than we understand, we are living in that right now. And I think so much of our drive has been to really stop looking at the fulfillment of what God is doing as that which will happen in the future. And so often that's been the case with the Christian world because there's no eyes to see. So they're not able to recognize that this is the time of their visitation. So it's always put out in the future. At some point, this will happen. At some point, that will happen. And the devil's the first one to say, yeah, you're right. But it's not right now. And yet, our drive has been to say that everything is to be identified as happening now. These things are happening to us now, even if we don't understand it. And, we're still trying to get our sea legs, so to speak, and really come to grips with it. And it's been challenging, to say the least, because, it is all new territory. But there is something that's happening in the glory of God that is beginning to rest upon the sons that we haven't recognized, perhaps. Maybe some of you have. I know I've just been looking at it this past week and just giving it more thought, because more and more the countenance that's resting upon the sons is becoming brighter and brighter. And, you could say, well, it's just, you could say, well, what is that? It's the presence of the Lord. But when you really stop and dissect it a little bit, it's really the glory. Because the promise is in Romans, those whom he justified, he will glorify. And so we're in the midst of coming in a process of coming out of, or somewhere in the middle of this, of the act of being glorified, which cannot be separated from the indwelling of the Father and the Son. There is nothing it goes hand in hand. The appearance of the Father within you and the glorification subsequently that the sons experience. And I believe that's what, was shown to Daniel, in the latter days, which are now, a day that shine as the brightness of the firmament. It's a glory that's being visited. And there is so much you could go into the scriptures and just begin to read about the glory and the Shekinah glory. And you can go back and you can read about the temple. And we know that the temple back in the days of the Old Testament was a sign of the living temple that God, was going to raise up and dwell in fully. And, so you talk about the temple in the Old Testament and the visitation of glory that rested upon the temple. And yet it was just a foreshadow of what is happening now. And so there's just something of the appearing of the Father that, we're still coming alive to, still coming into an awareness of. And I'm kind of groping for words to really identify it. But the easiest thing I saw was just imagine, going up and giving someone a hug or shake their hand. And as you, let go, there's like a little impartation of glory that happens there for a minute. And then it fades off of the one that maybe you gave a hug to or you held their hand. Almost like a little bit of stardust, you might say. It's just something is just conveyed because you're carrying the glory of God, and the glory can't be separated from the fire, and that's why the fire has been really intense upon the sons. It's been the purging and the purifying work of the Spirit, but it's also been the visitation of the glory of God. Only the difference is that it's not fading off of us. And that's something that you have to have eyes to see it and understand how far into the kingdom you've come and how much you've already become. The glorification of the saints is not something that is a single act that happens. All of a sudden, the saints are just glorified. It's something that has been unfolding. The more he possesses you, the more he has taken up his abode, the greater the glorifying of all that you are is happening in him. And the greater the light is that is shining from you. And it's really kind of a mystery. It's been a mystery to the saints themselves, to the sons, to realize how much of a visitation of God's glory that has already begun to rest upon them. I was looking in Second Thessalonians 1:10. Let me see if I can find that without too much ado here. Yeah. Talks about when he comes to be glorified in his saints on that day, to be marveled at among all who believed. It's just, there is something happening here, and once again, it's kind of a mystery, especially to the saints, exactly what is happening within them. And we've been sensing it over the past week. A lot has been done in the Spirit to break up a lot of that which has been in the Spirit restraining the release of the saints. And we've talked about the whore that feeds off the blood of the martyrs. And God's been gradually exposing that working as it's had its connections. And the more that is breaking off the saints, the more the light and the life is coming forth within them, because they're not carrying or running the race being bled dry by the satanic cunning of the spirit world that has sought to work behind closed doors. So we have seen some things change this past week very dynamically. And so I know that this coming week, things are going to be quite a bit different. I don't even know how they'll be different. But the minute you take off that which has been feeding off of you, there comes the opportunity for real growth and real change. And that's always been a promise that we've had, that, when that which has been feeding off of you is taken away, then the real breakthroughs of resurrection life and the changes that God has ordained can really come forth. But until that time, when these things have been exposed and dealt with, the sons have been running with, weights around their ankles, and that has been the case. We've gained great progress, but it's been a slow road, and it's taken a great deal out of us to really make major progress. But we're in a time, and I don't know, I believe it will continue to unfold for everyone, that that which has been feeding off your life, that which has been working behind closed doors, you might say, to deter the breakthrough that God has for you, is being exposed. And with that exposing is a release from that. And once you're released from that which has been feeding off your life, the dynamics of everything begins to change. And I know for us, that which has had a great deal of access and yet was very hidden, was dealt with and came to a conclusion probably around Thursday of last week, Wednesday, Thursday. And so I know that this next chapter, short chapter, is going to be quite a bit different. And but we can't exactly say what that will be, except when you remove that which has been feeding, which has caused some level of blindness, when that's removed, all of a sudden your eyes begin to see more clearly. And that really is what's happening, and that's why there's been so much at stake. And in the same token, why we haven't really been able to explain it to anyone specifically, because it's all very individual. It's something that you have to see for yourself as it applies to you and within you. And you begin to see the bottlenecks, the blockades, the connections, whatever has been there that has blocked your ability to really see and change. And we've said this for several weeks now, that God is removing that. So, and it's almost like layers. You take one layer off, and then it exposes another layer. And so the more we get free, the more we're going to be able to get free. It's kind of like a snowball effect. So, but it's important we don't go and turn around and then get bonded back in again accidentally. And I've seen that happen. God sets you free, and then all of a sudden everything seems fine, and then you slip back into some sort of a bondage. So you have to be very careful and guard what you have. And I believe that this week will be a week of greater insight and change, as well as exposing on another level of anything that needs to be taken care of, any baggage that is still hanging on that has to be removed. It's like you can't see what you need on one level until the prior level is cleared, if you understand. So God clears one layer off of you. Then you can see what you need to do on the next level. But you can't see that far ahead until that which is restrained is removed. And so that we've seen happening. God's removing one layer at a time. But we can't take the assumption that, well, it's all okay, we can just kind of relax now. Because now it's even more intense that you double up and realize, okay, now you've got to take it to the next level. God's freed you up enough to see, so you're seeing very clearly, more than you have. But then the next thing is you've got to take that to the next level. And God will show you again. And as he shows you, he'll change you. How you've related, how you've reached out, how you've allowed yourself to be touched. Everything within your personal paradigm. And it just all goes through a shift. And everything tightens up again so that you don't inadvertently start recreating bonds or any other type of baggage. And then that you have to be very careful with. So, all of this is happening. I mean, it's like when God speaks a word, it could take chapters to explain it all, and yet it could just be so simple, but so complex. And what's happening to the sons now is not just a single layer of something. It's so multifaceted what's happening, because as we get free, creation begins to get free. So every time something is taken off of you and just jettisoned, and you step out into another layer of freedom, that freedom has its reverberation, and it begins to affect the spirit world. And what the effects of that are remains to be seen. But I know that all of creation is in travail with us, and that's the promise. They have been, but now big time. Just kind of wrap your head around that for a second. All of creation, just all of them, except maybe the most minute orders that don't really understand anything. But all of creation is in travail, even if they don't really understand exactly what that travail is all about, or they just understand a little bit. But they're in travail. And they're in travail to see their own release. And that is kind of a mystery, because since day one, the elemental spirits and so much of the spirit world has been under the constraints of the principalities and powers. And they have not had the ability to really walk free of that manipulation or control that is exerted from the satanic hosts. And so as the spirit world, as the elementals, as the different orders within God's creation begin to break free, that only happens because you begin to break free. So this is really quite a responsibility for, you could say, well, it's all about you, but it's not about you. And yet, so much is resting upon you breaking free. Yeah, you. Not the other person in the room. There's no one else in the room. It's you. We don't, I wish I could say that we realize, but I don't think we do. Maybe we realize to a degree how much is resting upon our shoulders, how important it is that we break free. And you could just look at, and it could seem so inconsequential, just some issue, some area in your life, and you've been bound up and restrained, or that which has been hidden has manipulated and controlled you, bonds, contacts, you name it, whatever. And you haven't realized how much is riding upon you getting your release. And so as you begin to break free, it has a dynamic that touches everything. And so that's why it's so important that you turn around and get rebonded again or bound back under anything. But you continue to get more and more free. And so the whole world of spirit and the whole natural plane and the plane of the weather and the elementals and everything, they're all in this travail with us. And, so I'm always working with this, trying to kind of visualize it rather than just read the word and just kind of slough it off, but to just kind of, visualize it for a second as best you can and say, okay, all of creation, they're in travail. Well, what is travail? Well, it's a woman, giving birth. It's the intensity of what is experienced, as an example of a woman going, into childbirth and birthing a child. There's that travail. We know what that's called. And the travail is very intense. And so all of creation at this point in time is in the greatest travail that they've ever been. And I'm, and I still don't quite see it clear enough myself. Some people say, well, all these hurricanes are being controlled by, this, or they're being man-made and, whatever. And I just don't have an opinion. They very well could be all man-made and, whatever the satanic world is doing behind it as they channel through human beings thinking that they have got the control and they're doing their due. And all they are is just unwitting channels. But there's so much more happening than we understand. It's not linear. It's not what you see, what is. There's always a number of layers of things that are happening at the same time. And so there is this visitation of glory that's coming upon the sons, and it's a glory that's not fading. So what's happening? Well, you're beginning to carry the glory of God in a very mystical and magical way, and yet that glory that's resting upon you is the same thing as the fire. And so you're living in the fire, but it's also the glory that's happening to you. It's one and the same. And yet we're in this process of change where God is ripping off the baggage and exposing that which has been hidden and breaking off where the whore has been able to feed off of you, getting you out of being sympathetic and moving on some soulish level of, oh, dear Christians, oh, dear brother, oh, dear sister, or whatever, and just getting you free from all of that which is born of the soul. And then as that's happening, there's a release happening to creation. And I would assume, from what I've seen coming, although I don't necessarily understand where we are in the timeline of it, that the more creation gets free. It's only going to happen because we get free. And that's going to cause a lot more earth changes on a natural plane, as well as what we're going to see happen in the spirit. It's all so connected, and it just comes down to a responsibility that we carry. We carry this responsibility 24/7, even if we're not aware of it. You go about your day, you're doing things, and the Lord is with you, and you pray and all of this, but you don't realize the mantle that you're carrying, except maybe every once in a while the day gets real heavy. And you might have a hard time getting up. And then the Lord has to come and kind of help a little bit. Lord, the mantle's a little heavy. But that's okay. That's the destiny for God's sons. We were never meant to carry it in and of ourselves. But we certainly try. We certainly try. But that's okay. Sometimes we're a slow learner, sometimes we're a fast learner. In my book, I think it still takes a little bit too long for it all to come together. Anyway, we're going into the season of the Feast of Tabernacles. I think that's around the 5th of October. Day of Atonement is the end of this month. And the New Year's around the 21st of September. I don't put a lot of import on it. It just is what it is. But I know that the sons are being propelled into something that they haven't walked in. And it's the greatest this year than it's ever been. You always look and think, okay, Lord, is this the time? Or next year, is this the time, Lord? Until you start feeling like we're looking for a certain window where something's just going to click, but you realize it's been an unfolding window. And we're so much closer now than we were a year ago or 2 years ago. But it's happening, and it's happening in us, and it's happening to us. And we're in the act of being glorified. It would be a good thing to do a real extensive study on that, to really understand, Lord, you're glorifying yourself in me. That is the promise. But we don't understand the experience of it. Just like everything else, there's no books out there that will explain what it means to be glorified. How does it exactly happen? At what point do you take strong notice of it? How hot is the fire? At what point? It just is what it is. But one thing about it, it's like the 3 Hebrew children, in the time of Daniel, and they went in the furnace, and the flames were so hot but all it did was burn off the shackles. That's all it did, and freed them. And so, as hot as the fire has been, as hot as the visitation of glory has been and is going to continue to be, all it's doing is just burning off the shackles and opening up our ability to see. And yet we realize that we are the main factor in what's going to happen on the face of the earth. All of creation's in travail for the release or manifestation of the sons of God. I don't know how many of them are specifically aware that that is exactly what they're in travail for, but I know they're all in travail. They don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. They're all being pulled up into this and have been. And I know that in the times and occasions they've come, they've tried to convey a little bit more of who they are and what they're about. But, like everything, what's happening is so greater than just what we find ourselves dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And we have to be careful to catch ourselves so we're not just kind of consumed by what we're going through or our challenges of the day, but realize that we're part of a greater picture, and what is happening to us and in us is affecting everything. And it's always good sometimes just to go back and remind yourself. Just remind yourself, this is what's happening. Oh, but I've got this challenge, this thing's happening, God's delivering me here, there's this going on, that going on, whatever. It's all good. But it's just a small part of the greater picture of who you are. And because of who you are, I mean, it would be one thing to say, well, you're just some nice Christian fellow and person, and God loves you, and so on and so forth, and you're on your nice path, the Yellow Brick Road or whatever. But that's not who you are. That's not who the sons of God are. They are those whom God has sent for this hour. And so because of that, everything happening to you is affecting everything. I was thinking about Arthur and Daphne, who have been on the call this evening. I think they're on now. And we love you guys. And it can feel like you're isolated there in South Africa. There's just a handful. It's just like, what is the Lord? What are the sons? The sons are a handful of seeds. How's the word go? Spread on the mountains. It's just a handful. What God is doing is not some huge movement with fanfare and thousands in the churches and all of that. No, it has not been. It never was. It's a very small remnant. It's a handful of seed. And so you could look at the whole continent of Africa or look at South Africa and then step back for a moment and just say, what happens to me? And as I break free, it's going to change the whole dynamic in this country. It's like years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I saw one of the main principalities over South Africa, which is a spirit of perversion. And I realized that as God's sons come forth in that region, it is going to displace that perversion. And that spirit is going to come down. That principality is going to be brought down. And it's going to happen in every state of the Union, every country. I was going back over some of the various states here in the United States. Florida, strong spirit of perversion. And just different states have different prevailing principalities. But they're being displaced as the sons in those localities begin to come forth. It's happening. So, I mean, there is so much happening simultaneously. You can't really even put your finger on it and say, well, this is what God is doing. This is what God is doing. And the truth is, he's doing that and he's doing 10 other things at the same time. So I think this is all we want to do tonight, to just kind of touch bases. I know the enemy would have been delighted if we would have just shut down the conference calls, because there was a point that we weren't sure what the Lord wanted to do after completing the last call on Tuesday, which really completed a certain segment. But I realized that it was just the enemy. And we're going to keep speaking the word. And even, whatever, we're just going to keep hitting it. And God's going to keep opening our sight. Because what we're doing is affecting everything. And you have to remind yourself in the morning, when you get up, when you go to bed, everything you're doing is affecting everything. You're not just one small player on a large, puzzle board. You're very much a part of what is bringing a change on every level. And even if we don't understand the dynamics of creation as they have entered into this travail with us, and even if we don't understand that what we're living in, among many other things, is travail. You could take every word that's come since July, and none of them have stopped happening. All of those words are happening simultaneously. You can go back 20 words, whatever it is. They're all happening simultaneously. It's not one word comes and now, okay, we're done with that. Next word comes, okay, now this is what God is doing. And then the next one, this is what God is doing. No, He's doing all of it. It's happening simultaneously. And we're living this. God's sons are living this. So it's really quite interesting when you really grasp that and how much you're affecting everything right now. So the month of September, I believe, is going to continue to unfold and really bring some surprising things to us. But we stay in the path and we just say, Lord, you keep visiting us with your glory, because I know that every appearing you have, it talks about in Corinthians how we change from glory to glory. Well, as we go from glory to glory, the glory doesn't fade. It's not like, okay, well, I got that glory, now I'm going on to the next. No, it's just the glory just continues to grow upon you until people from universes away can look out and begin to see the light. And they see the light. It could be dimensions or worlds away, but they see the light. And you'd say, well, okay, I know that we are the light. We're the children of light. Our Father is the Father of lights. And all of that is true. But the light is the manifested glory of God that is growing upon you daily. I always wondered about those, I think was it 3 of them that appeared to us a few years ago as they were seeking the light to see, because they could see it from so far away. And I thought, well, it's just your appearing in us, Lord. It's what we are. We are the light as our Father. It's the Father of lights, but I began to realize it is that, but it's more. It's the glory of God that is beginning to manifest dynamically more and more and more. So anyway, we'll close this down. This is a short meditation for the evening, and we'll see about doing another call here in a couple of days. Sorry for the difficulty in getting this thing started. I'm not sure if this is going to be the service that we end up staying with, or if we are going to try one more in the process. Anyway, we'll go ahead and shut this down.